The fluorescent lights flickered erratically, casting eerie shadows across the grimy tiles of the abandoned Metropolis Central Station. Evelyn Reeves, a seasoned urban explorer with a shock of red hair and piercing green eyes, carefully made her way down the crumbling escalator. The musty air hung heavy with the scent of decay and something else, something alien and unsettling. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat as she reached the bottom, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness like a knife. Behind her, Jasper Holbrook, a lanky physicist with thick-rimmed glasses, fumbled with his equipment bag. "Evelyn, are you sure about this?" he whispered, his voice echoing off the vacant tunnels. "The readings I'm getting are off the charts." Evelyn didn't respond immediately, her attention fixed on a strange, pulsating glow emanating from one of the service tunnels. She'd explored countless abandoned places before, but something about this felt different, wrong. As they ventured deeper into the labyrinthine subway system, the air grew thicker, almost gelatinous. Ravi Patel, the team's biologist, trailed behind them, his dark eyes darting nervously from shadow to shadow. "There's something alive down here," he murmured, adjusting the strap of his sample case. "Something that shouldn't be." Evelyn nodded grimly, her hand instinctively tightening around her flashlight. She'd heard rumors of strange occurrences in the subway system, of maintenance workers going missing and late-night passengers experiencing lost time, but she'd dismissed them as urban legends. Now, surrounded by the oppressive silence of the tunnels, those stories didn't seem so far-fetched. The trio rounded a corner, and Evelyn's flashlight beam fell upon a sight that made her blood run cold. The tunnel walls were covered in a viscous, iridescent substance that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Tendrils of the material reached out like hungry fingers, and as they watched in horror, a rat scurried too close. In an instant, the substance engulfed the creature, its squeals of terror cut short as it was absorbed into the grotesque mass. "Dear God," Jasper breathed, his face pale in the sickly glow. "What is that thing?" Before anyone could answer, a low, reverberating hum filled the air, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The substance on the walls began to writhe more vigorously, and Evelyn felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to touch it. She took a step forward, her hand outstretched before Ravi's sharp cry snapped her out of the trance. "Don't!" he shouted, pulling her back. "We need to get out of here, now!" But as they turned to retreat, they realized with growing horror that the way they had come was now blocked by a wall of the pulsating substance. They were trapped, with no choice but to press forward into the unknown depths of the tunnel system. As Evelyn, Jasper, and Ravi ventured deeper into the subway's labyrinth, the air grew thick with an otherworldly miasma. The walls pulsed with an unnatural life, the iridescent substance spreading like a hungry organism. Evelyn's urban explorer instincts warred with her growing sense of dread. "We need to find another way out," she said, her voice tight with tension. Jasper nodded, his scientific curiosity momentarily overridden by fear. "The subway maps," he suggested. "If we can find a maintenance room, we might be able to locate an emergency exit." Their search led them to an old control room, its dusty consoles flickering to life as they entered. Ravi's eyes widened as he examined a monitor displaying security camera feeds. "Look at this," he gasped. The screens showed glimpses of other parts of the subway system, each more horrifying than the last. In one, a mass of tentacles writhed out of a ticket booth. In another, a group of what once might have been humans shuffled aimlessly, their bodies grotesquely deformed. As they watched, transfixed by the nightmarish scenes, a low moan echoed through the tunnels. "We're not alone down here," Evelyn whispered, her hand instinctively reaching for the hunting knife at her belt. The sound grew closer, accompanied by the wet slap of something dragging itself across the floor. Jasper fumbled with his equipment, pulling out a device that emitted a high-pitched whine. "It's some kind of bioelectric field," he muttered. "Unlike anything I've ever seen." Suddenly, the door to the control room burst open. A figure stumbled in, its body a horrific fusion of human and something else. Tendrils of the iridescent substance wrapped around its limbs, pulsing in time with a rhythm that seemed to emanate from deep within the earth. Ravi let out a strangled cry, stumbling backward and knocking over a stack of old reports. As papers scattered across the floor, Evelyn caught sight of an official seal, a government logo she didn't recognize. In that moment of distraction, the creature lunged forward. Evelyn reacted on instinct, her knife flashing in the dim light. The blade sank into the thing's flesh, but instead of blood, a viscous, glowing fluid oozed from the wound. The creature recoiled, letting out an inhuman shriek that reverberated through the tunnels. As it fled, Evelyn noticed something clutched in its malformed hand, a tattered ID badge. The name was obscured, but the title was clear. Project Subterranean. The revelation of Project Subterranean sent a shockwave through the group. "This is no accident," Jasper breathed, his scientific mind racing to connect the dots. "The government. They created this." Evelyn's face hardened, her explorer's curiosity giving way to grim determination. "We need to find out more," she declared, "and we need to stop this before it spreads to the surface." With renewed purpose, they delved deeper into the twisting corridors, following the trail of the fleeing creature. The tunnels led them to a vast chamber, once a bustling station platform, now transformed into a nightmarish hive. The walls and ceiling writhed with the living substance, forming grotesque organic structures. In the center stood a massive pulsating mass, tendrils reaching out to connect with the infected hosts that shuffled around it. Ravi gagged, his scientific detachment crumbling in the face of such horror. "It's a hive mind," he whispered. "They're all connected to that thing." As they watched from the shadows, a group of figures in hazmat suits entered from another tunnel. Unlike the shambling infected, these moved with purpose, taking samples and making notes. "Government scientists," Jasper hissed. "They're still studying it even now." Evelyn's eyes narrowed as she spotted a familiar face among them. Dr. Eleanor Volkov, a renowned virologist who had disappeared months ago. "We need to get closer," Evelyn said. "Find out what they know." Their attempt at stealth was short-lived. An alarm blared, and suddenly they were surrounded by both infected hosts and hazmat-suited scientists. Dr. Volkov stepped forward, her eyes gleaming with a mixture of madness and triumph behind her protective visor. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice distorted by her suit's speaker. "But since you are, you might as well become part of the next phase." She gestured, and the infected lurched forward. In the chaos that ensued, Evelyn, Jasper, and Ravi fought desperately. Evelyn's knife flashed, keeping the grasping hands at bay. Jasper used his equipment as makeshift weapons, the electric shock seeming to disorient the infected. Ravi, driven by a surge of adrenaline, managed to tackle one of the scientists, tearing off their helmet. What he saw beneath made him recoil in horror. The scientist's face was already half transformed, the parasitic substance creeping across their features. The battle in the hive chamber raged on, a desperate struggle for survival against overwhelming odds. Evelyn's knife flashed in deadly arcs, keeping the grasping hands of the infected at bay, while Jasper's improvised electrical weapons crackled and sparked. Ravi, driven by a mix of terror and scientific curiosity, managed to subdue one of the hazmat-suited scientists, tearing off their helmet to reveal the horrifying truth of their partial transformation. In the chaos, Dr. Volkov retreated towards a hidden door, clutching a case filled with research materials. Evelyn, spotting this escape attempt, made a split-second decision. "Jasper! Ravi!" she shouted over the din. "Get to the surface! Warn everyone!" Before her companions could protest, she darted after Volkov, disappearing into the secret passage. Jasper and Ravi, surrounded by the encroaching horde, had no choice but to fight their way towards the exit, carrying the terrible knowledge of what lay beneath the city. Evelyn pursued Dr. Volkov through a maze of sterile corridors, a stark contrast to the organic horror of the main chamber. The chase led them to a high-tech laboratory, where vats of the parasitic substance bubbled, and specimens of various stages of infection were displayed. Volkov, cornered, turned to face Evelyn with a manic grin. "You don't understand," she said, her voice a mixture of pride and desperation. "This is the next step in human evolution. We're creating a new species, one that can survive anything." As Volkov ranted, Evelyn's eyes darted around the lab, taking in the details. Her gaze fell upon a series of documents outlining Project Subterranean, a government initiative to create a bioweapon that could infiltrate enemy populations undetected. But something had gone wrong. The parasites had evolved beyond their creator's control, developing a hive mind and an insatiable hunger to spread and consume. In a final, desperate move, Volkov lunged at Evelyn with a syringe filled with writhing, iridescent fluid. Evelyn dodged, her explorer's reflexes saving her from infection. In the struggle, the syringe shattered against a control panel. Alarms blared as the containment systems began to fail, the laboratory's self-destruct sequence initiating. Evelyn, realizing the danger, grabbed as much evidence as she could and ran, leaving Volkov screaming amidst her disintegrating life's work. Evelyn burst out of a hidden entrance in an abandoned warehouse, clutching the stolen research materials to her chest. The ground trembled beneath her feet as explosions rocked the underground complex. She stumbled forward, lungs burning, searching desperately for any sign of Jasper and Ravi. Relief washed over her as she spotted them in the distance, supporting each other as they emerged from a subway entrance. As the trio reunited, sirens wailed in the distance. Government vehicles converged on the area, no doubt drawn by the underground detonations. "We need to disappear," Evelyn said urgently, her voice hoarse. "They can't know we survived." Jasper nodded grimly, while Ravi stared back at the subway entrance, his eyes haunted by what he'd witnessed below. Together, they slipped away into the labyrinth of back alleys, carrying with them the terrible knowledge of what lay beneath the city's streets. In the days that followed, Evelyn, Jasper, and Ravi pored over the stolen documents, piecing together the full scope of Project Subterranean. The government had indeed created the parasites as a bioweapon, but their true nature had been misunderstood. The entities were not of this earth. They had been cultivated from a meteorite found deep underground. In trying to weaponize them, the scientists had awakened something ancient and hungry, something that now threatened to consume not just the city, but potentially the entire world. As news reports began to surface about gas leaks and structural damage in the subway system, the trio knew they had to act. Using their combined knowledge, Evelyn's urban exploration skills, Jasper's scientific expertise, and Ravi's biological insights, they began to formulate a plan. They couldn't fight the parasites head-on, but perhaps they could find a way to contain them, to prevent their spread to the surface world. The final pages of Evelyn's journal detailed their desperate plan: to use the city's old flood control systems to inundate the infected areas with a specially formulated mixture. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it might buy enough time to find a way to truly stop the parasites. As Evelyn closed the journal, her hand trembling slightly, she looked at her companions. They nodded silently, understanding the risks. Tomorrow they would descend once more into the tunnels, armed with knowledge and a desperate plan. The fate of the city, perhaps of all humanity, rested on their shoulders. As they prepared for the challenge ahead, Evelyn couldn't help but wonder, in trying to create the ultimate weapon, had the government inadvertently engineered humanity's downfall?